cities joining the suit by the turn of the century. This brings us back nicely to the foundation of the Vegan Society, which is the oldest recognised vegan organisation in the world and was founded in the United Kingdom by pioneers Donald Watson and Sally, otherwise known as Elsie Shrigley, who called on non-dairy vegetarian allies to organise in 1944.
One interesting part of the history of the vegan social movement is the fact that the people who formed it and in the end ran it had no idea that that was going to happen, that that was going to be their fate. They simply wanted to have a vegan enclave as such within the vegetarian movement. But the vegetarians said no, and that was a good thing in the end. The vegetarians said to the vegans, no, you go and do your own thing. And so that's what happened in 1944.
Donald, his wife Dorothy, Elsie, Faye and her husband George Henderson and others would in November of 44 pave the way for everything that was to come and for what we know today as veganism, including of course the very word vegan, coined from the first three and the last two letters of the word vegetarian.
Now their first job was to prove that a 100% plant diet was satisfactory, because that was against the medical orthodoxy of the time. In fact, their doctors and their vegetarian friends all believed that they were going to die.
But what were those core ideas that inspired the movement's creation? Were they based on those of rights or welfare? Let's find out together. I wanted to take this moment to reiterate something I don't think that many are aware of, and certainly I hadn't fully realised until I started researching this film. The entire philosophy was born off the back of two world wars, one of which was very much still ongoing at the time of the foundation, and the idea of peace and justice and freedom were all inspired by the exact opposite which each of those had witnessed envelop them all. Donald Watson for certain lost some of those closest to him during this time, and it's safe to say that all of the founding members will have been deeply affected by the Great Depression, oppression and hopelessness, not to mention the constant threat of losing their own lives. It took not only strength and courage, but also a deep level of respect and empathy towards others. At a time when it would have been so easy to be selfish, they instead wanted to be selfless, and this all well before the end of the conflict, and especially before the two atrocities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The reason that I wanted to make sure this was brought to the attention of everyone is because it completely goes against that modern day consensus that veganism is just a diet, when in the reality it was always about the direct opposition of violence, the opposition of injustice, the opposition of oppression. It was always a philosophy of peace, justice and freedom for all.
In an interesting history of the movement when it was 70 years old, Dr. Samantha Calvert points out that one of the pioneers, Leslie Cross, in 1949, said that, hang on a second, we don't have a philosophy of veganism. The vegan diet was defined, but not veganism. So that's what they set out to do from then on until around about 1954. However, even before that, there were some attempts. For example, this is Donald Watson from 1945. He's the best known of the co-founders of the vegan social movement. And he said that veganism was the opposition of the exploitation of sentient life, which was a pretty good start to what became vegan philosophy. Leslie Cross, though, was really the person whose writings established the evolution of vegan philosophy. What he did really was establish what you could call the focus and the scope of veganism. The focus is always on our relationships with other animals, but the focus is only part of veganism. The scope is much wider and concerned environmental issues, and in particular issues about human evolution. They said that humanity had got into a new low, and veganism was the kind of key to get it out of this morass, if you like. The language could be a bit flowery at times, but the strong underlining message was always that the liberation of other animals was our own liberation, that the benefits to humanity from veganism would be absolutely huge. In two separate essays in 1951, Cross made it crystal clear that veganism was about animal liberation rather than animal welfare. He was very strong on this point. The vegan pioneers were liberators rather than reformists, although they did talk about reform as a type of social transformation sometimes. And more than anything else, they were, as they still are, abolitionist. Veganism is animal liberation, and veganism is abolitionist. In a very powerful essay that was written in 1954 called The Surge of Freedom, Leslie Cross spoke about the changes that a vegan revolution would bring. Some of those changes are obvious, he said. Obviously, we would stop eating other animals, vivisect on them, we wouldn't hunt and that kind of stuff. And then he said that there are some of the changes which are not so obvious. It's the benefits to humanity which fall into this category. Essentially, a vegan world would be transformative for the benefit of all. Veganism is, after all, a justice for all philosophy. Now, here's another articulation of vegan values from the 1960s from Eva Batt, and another one again from the 1980s or the 1990s, depending on which edition of this book is being cited. But overall, Matthew Cole, the sociologist, sums up things very well indeed, and he did this in 2014. He said that the vegan aim or object combines compassionate non-exploitation of other animals with an emancipated vegan self and a more compassionate human society. Vegan ethics from the beginning, says Cole, was directed towards these interconnected goals of transforming human beings and transforming human society. Both, he said, flowed from the foundational reconfiguration of human, non-human animal relations. So there we have it, the exciting and somewhat chaotic, you might say, beginnings of the vegan social movement and then the evolution of vegan philosophy as we know it now.